What's going on, everybody? It's yours truly, Connor here. Welcome back to the Marvel Roundtable. On this week's edition of the Marvel Roundtable, we go back into space and take a look at one of the, well, sleeper successes of Phase 2 as we follow up with James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, is the recipe for success going to be brewed here once again and be able to deliver some amazing comedic genius? Or is it just like a lot of other movies that unfortunately doesn't quite live up to the original? We're going to break it down and tell you all about this as we explore Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 right here on the Marvel Roundtable. What's going on, everybody? It's yours truly, Connor here. Welcome back to the Horny Goat YouTube channel. Of course, the Horny Goat podcasting network, where you can listen to us on all your favorite podcasting platforms. This, of course, is the Marvel Roundtable, a weekly show where each and every single week we break down every TV show or movie in the MCU. I'm surprised that my co-hosts have not hated me at this point in time yet, or if they do, they're doing a very good job of putting on their game face. And to be fair, Canadian Basement doesn't have his camera on, so I can just feel the seething rage, I think, from the other side of the camera. But
furious masturbation over here.
But in any case, of course, as you can hear, I am not alone. I've got with me the fantastic Heather joining with us, the tattooed mama. What's up, Heather?
Not much. I started getting the bookshelf together.
Ooh.
Nice.
Are you going to keep it there? Or are you going to relocate it like over behind you?
No, we're going to keep it there because JP's dad's military flag is going to go on that wall there.
Good call.
Are you putting it there to... Is that a window behind it?
Yes.
Hey, block out the sun?
Mm-hmm.
Black hole sun.
Vampire. I always knew you were one.
That's why I asked, because I'm like, well, are you blocking the window on purpose? Or, well, anyway, hey, listen.
It's between that and we don't want to buy more curtains. So, and the neighbor's house is like right there. So
instead, we're buying bookcases.
Tomato, you know?
Every problem has a solution.
And of course, we got with us everyone's favorite bear from upstairs, Canadian Basement. What up, Basement?
What's up, guys? I kind of excited to talk about this. I guess it's a fun movie.
We were gushing a little bit before we got on here, and kind of looking to the future because God knows there's enough shit that we're gonna be able to talk about in this franchise. And I mean, but we're barreling through it at a pretty decent level ever since we started doing these now once a week. We are just about the halfway point of Phase 3, which is kind of fucking crazy to think about.
Thank God.
For better or for worse.
Valleys.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, of course, if you guys are following along, like I said at the beginning and kind of hyping this up, we are taking a look at Marvel Studios' Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. If you guys missed the last couple of episodes, make sure you go check them out, as we did recently just, of course, reviewed Captain America Civil War, and, of course, the original, the OG Doctor Strange movie. And, of course, you can check out all the entire playlists of everything, of course, on the Horny Goat Podcast Network, and, of course, on the YouTube channel, where you guys can check out the playlist and check out all the other reviews that we've done of literally every other Marvel movie or Marvel Studios movie up to this point. I should be very clear because Jesus Christ, about to go down that wormhole. So we are here now at Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and it's interesting because and we talked about this a lot on the original Guardians review, is that this was to take Heather's line, a breath of fresh air in a lot of ways, because this was a franchise and a slew of characters that really did not get any major mainstream attention before the first movie. And I think, and I could be wrong here, I think most of us put the original Guardians movie as far as like the top 2 of Phase 2, right?
Yes. Yeah. It was definitely in the top 2. Some people had it at number 1. What was the one that...
Phase 2 had some strong heavyweights with Thor: The Dark World and Captain America: Winter Soldier. And then this one. So it was top 3, I should say. Top 3.
I think I put Winter Soldier, then Dark World, if I recall. But I forget really easy.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky because the first one, I think, did catch a lot of us off guard as far as how good it was. Not just in terms of, you know, the cast. I think the director, you know, James Gunn, obviously we've talked about him, and we've also we love his work in Peacemaker that we've all watched together. So it's
I'm just
Well,
gonna say they were fucking morons for getting rid of him in the first place.
Oh, we'll get to that.
yeah.
We'll get to that
Uh,
a little bit later
now
on.
I did miss the first one. I wasn't here for the first time you guys did this for Guardians of the Galaxy.
You were? You weren't here for Guardians
I
1?
wasn't here for the volume 1. No.
Oh, okay. See, we do so many streams now. And speaking of streams, I want to give some love to the chat real quick. Of course, we got Tim, Alpha, Federico. We've got Miss Metropolis. What's going on, Megs? Thanks for coming, popping in. We got Alpha, Cody. We got a full crew here tonight. Appreciate all you guys coming in here and popping in. Of course, we do have the chat. We have the poll in the chat. If you give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 a thumbs up or thumbs down, let us know your thoughts generally of the movie. So, since Basement, since you weren't here for the first one, do you want to give us like a brief little summation of what you thought about the first movie or what you remember from it, since it's been what, 5 movies since?
I didn't rewatch it either, so I'll give you something. But before we move on from the chat, I do want to give a shout out to anybody that did any like creations for HGW. So we got a couple like belts sent to us in the Discord and stuff like that
Yeah,
from a
holy
couple
hell.
people. I think is it Paul that tried to do a women's championship and wasn't able to upload it. I just looked at he was having problems uploading. I don't know if it's him specifically
They did
because
just
it's
do
a
an
different
update.
name.
They did just do an
'Cause
update, so that might be the
We'll
issue.
get 15 or 20 of them.
Yeah, it's just all
that's how it
And a
works.
shout out to Cody and Tim for retweeting the stream. But as far as it goes for the first one, I think it benefited greatly from no expectation. It was a good movie anyway, but like there's something to be said when you go into something and you literally have no idea what you're going into and most likely think it's going to be a train wreck. And I mean it's also like diverging from the path that they were on originally. Like I
and you
mean
get
this is like
Yeah.
a whole
fucking
left
amazing
field.
soundtrack right at the beginning of the movie. It's just like, what?
Any movie with an amazing soundtrack is automatically going to get like a 5 out of 10 and no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, that JP did say that was like, I think, yeah, I think it has the best soundtrack in all the MCU movies. I mean,
it definitely does.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like most like they used the soundtrack to create the story. It's the soundtrack and the story beats go hand in hand in this movie and the first one, so it just adds a bit more to the overall like instead of like you know how a lot of action movies you watch will have like and this is when the fast beat action sounds start as soon as they start fighting each other and it's like does it fit but it's not memorable. So
No.
yeah, I mean from what I recall of the first one, I liked it. And it's a weird fucking. It's just like this, where the weirdness of it works. The fact that
it leaves
it's
things
like
wide
so
open for them to do what, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't pigeonhole them as some of the other movies did.
it's so separate from anything. I can okay, so it's not based on Earth, which is a huge benefit to these movies. Because then you're not always going to compare it to what could potentially be possible, and you can
Right.
kind of lose yourself into the immersion of the movie. All right.
Mhm.
So I mean, I enjoyed the first one. I think I'd give the first one probably like a 7 or 7.5.
I think that's probably about where, without having going back and looking through it, I think that's about what we kind of all generally consensus like really voted for it. So, of course, of course, it's always the age-old question: can you capture lightning in a bottle? Can you do it a second time? Is the sequel going to live up to the original? And so this one's no different. I mean, at this point, this is now the this is what we've had: 3 Captain America movies, we've had 3 Iron Man movies, we've had 2 Thor movies, and we've had 2 Avengers movies. So this is now the 4th or 5th series of like a sequel to something else. But I think one of the biggest advantages, kind of like what Basement said, is like there's no expectation set up, although this time now there is, because we're obviously going to compare it to the first one. So as always, we're going to blanket statement this whole thing first. So I'll throw it to Heather first. Generally speaking, Heather, without going into too much detail, your thoughts about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, just general thoughts.
Hold on.
I'm holding.
Got 2 legs. It's chilly in the house today. So
Miners.
there we go. Generally speaking, again, as you said, breath of fresh air after Doctor Strange and just the random, seriously bad CGI of Doctor Strange to come to the random but better CGI of this. How you doing, Frederico? Um, and it's just, again, it hit with the great soundtrack and just the comedy while also being serious at the same time. And it's just like, good God. James Gunn is their gold mine, and they never should have let him go. Because I tell
Agreed.
you right now, if James Gunn did Doctor Strange, it would have been so much better.
Oh, geez.
I
Yeah.
I feel like
Imagine.
I feel like James Gunn. There's certain movie like the projects he chooses are the projects that work for him.
Mhm.
I don't know if he'd like I'd want to see him do multiple different Marvel movies. It's just like it'll lose its like appeal if you spread that too thin. It's like the Sam Raimi thing we talked about with Doctor Strange multiverse, where it's kind of like you start to see like instances of that director, and after seeing them a lot, they wear a little bit. But sorry, Heather.
No, I was done. You're good.
No, um, yeah,
Baseman.
I was like, I guess I'm next. There's only three of us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, true. Wendy, you're next. Uh,
She's yet to watch the movie in full yet, so.
actually, before you get real quick, Basement, just to kind of piggyback off of like the director thing, and I did quickly look up James Gunn's filmography history and stuff like that. And as far as he's been like he's mostly been a writer on a majority of his projects that he's been on, but he also has directed in some of them as well. So, more often than not, if he's directing, he's also involved in the writing process. Slither was his first big
that movie.
director writing piece. Then came Guardians 2, of course, Suicide Squad in 2021. And then, of course, we will be getting Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 at the time of this recording, about a year from now. And then as far as shows, obviously, Peacemaker, the more recent one, as far as him having like full creative control. He was like director, writer, executive producer, and all that stuff, which, we watched Peacemaker. And the only reason I bring it up is because we've watched it together. And I think I don't want to speak on everyone's I think we all collectively fucking loved it. And it was,
I adore that fucking show. Season 2 needs to happen tomorrow. God damn it.
I hated it personally.
yeah, bullshit.
No, it was a lot of fun.
But Peacemaker is an example of like if James Gunn had complete control, which he pretty much did. And so even though, Marvel, there's guidelines per se because it has to fit within the MCU, like, puzzle pieces. To Heather's point, yeah, they should have never let him go.
I thought they like had trouble with him, but then the crew was like, we're leaving. We're not going to do this fucking like. I know Dave Bautista stood up for him, and I think Chris Pratt. So I think
Mhm.
he's actually on. He's the director for the third one, is he not?
He is. He's the writer and director for the third one. So for what he's referring to is in July 2018. In my notes here, James Gunn had some public criticism of a certain presidential candidate. That's all I'm going to say. A commentator drew attention to controversial jokes that Gunn posted on social media between 2008 and 2012. Amidst the criticism of tweets, Disney severed ties with Gunn as the director of the upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 film at the time. He was also dismissed from a role to help lead Marvel's planned cosmic universe. Gunn responded, "I regretted those jokes for many years," etc. and so forth. Disney then decision received criticism from many entertainers and journalists, including actors Dave Bautista, Patton Oswalt, Michael Ian Black. So many people came to his defense. Rick and Morty creators. What's that?
It's that horseshit mentality of like we're gonna find something in your past and hold you accountable for today, the way today treats these things.
Yeah, basically, and but long story short, a lot of people stood up to him, and Batista being one of them is the most notable ones, starting to walk out and would not do Guardians 3 without James Gunn. And so in March of 2019, Gunn was reinstated by Disney as the director of film after meeting with Alan Horn. Gunn started producing on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 last October, right after Suicide Squad had been completed. So as of the recording of this episode, Guardians 3 has wrapped. They have filmed it. It's all in the can now. I believe they're working on the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special that he'll also be a part of, which I think is a Disney Plus exclusive. I'll warn you right now, chances are, unless that thing has some sort of major canonical tie-in, we're not going to cover it on this roundtable, unless Basement really wants to.
It'd be like that Star Wars fucking holiday thing.
It's going to be better. It's going to be better than that.
Don't.
It's the family of Chewbacca's or some shit.
Just don't get me
like I've
freaking
seen
started.
clips of it. I'm like, this looks hilariously stupid. But okay, to sum up, I guess this movie. Obviously the soundtrack's really good. I think the CGI thing is because it's so heavily incorporated in this movie. Almost like most of like they don't really mix real sets and CGI. They either have a real set or they have a CGI set. Most of the time that I've noticed in this movie, sometimes you can see some pretty fucking atrocious like green screening, which Marvel is known for. But
It's
overall,
not a
the
majority of
visuals,
the movie, like fucking.
the visuals in this movie are better than the visuals in fucking Moon Knight. Like,
I'm just saying, listen, I'm telling you, Moon Knight gets better, all right? I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's the best, but goddamn.
I'm always going to harp on that. Like,
I know, and rightfully so.
But yeah, this movie, it's fun. I did enjoy it. And something, when the movie like sets a tone to not be taken seriously, then I'm gonna go into it and not take it seriously. Like a lot of the other Marvel movies that have serious tones, and this is my gripe with Doctor Strange. The whole idea, it was, yeah, it's like fantastical, but it still starts out as a fucking surgeon in the real world and shit like that. But it's this also doesn't have that crutch of magic that Doctor Strange had that was never explained, right? So everything in this I can get behind because it's fucking obviously fantastical and meant to be that way. I did enjoy it, and I'll say why. But there's like James Gunn is better when given a higher like a fucking mature rating or ranking on whatever he's
Yeah.
making, because there's some cheesy ass shit in this movie at times.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but it still didn't. It didn't take away from me enjoying it. I mean, but I get what you're saying in terms of like there's a noticeable difference, obviously, in terms of like the maturity content level. What I will say, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if you were finished.
I I'm pretty much done, but Bagsy, I didn't really pick on Moon Knight. I've seen only the first 3 episodes, and I'm enjoying it so far.
You wait. I'm just telling you, wait till you. We'll
I'm
get
just waiting for
there.
the
We
hippo.
will get there. But Moon
The
Knight
hippo
is
better be super important.
Moon Knight is my second favorite MCU Disney Plus show out of all of them, and that's a tough thing to say. But we'll get there when we get there. But no, I mean, generally speaking, Guardians 2, it's hard to live up to the original, right? And the original just kind of came in like a bat out of hell, and nobody, like we talked about that numerous times, nobody expected it to be as good as it was. All the right elements were there, and I think that all the elements were right in the sequel as well, but obviously the tone was very different because where the first one was doing a lot, it was doing a lot in one movie, but it balanced, I think it balanced everything mostly well in the first one. This one felt more like, I'm not saying this necessarily in a bad way, but it felt like Peter Quill featuring the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well,
sort of.
I'm not gonna say that. This was more like Peter Quill and Rocket Raccoon featuring the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, yeah. Well, my point is that, I mean, and I get that too, because obviously Groot is more or less taken out of the picture. I mean, as far as a major character, right? He's more like right. Rocket.
Drax. What are you gonna get with Drax, really? Except for like
right, Drax. By the way, Drax is still Drax is still fantastic. He is one of my favorite characters. He might be my favorite Guardian of the Galaxy, to be completely honest with you.
And they do set up for Gamora.
I was about to say, and the Gamora one, it's tough because, like, again, we try to measure these things on standalone, and standalone, she's kind of the suffers the most as far as any sort of growth, but at the same time, there is a shit. Well, actually, because there's stuff with Nebula too. So I mean,
standalone in this movie, her storyline or her portion sucks because it sucks standalone. Knowing
Right.
where it goes, it's a lot more.
Yeah, it's an easier pill to swallow because we know that and they kind of heavily insinuate that things are going in that direction, but still, I still enjoyed it. There were still and what I'll say this before we get into too deep of it is, I think I've said this before, and as like a foreshadowing, I said that and we've all said this before, that one of Marvel's individual movies' biggest problems are the villains or the antagonists. To me, this is the start. Well, before Loki, Loki's in a whole different category in my opinion, but Loki was kind of like the beginning.
And we had what's his nuts from Civil War.
Baron Zemo.
Yeah, there we go.
So now we're starting to get better villains, is my point. And to me, Loki was fantastic. Zemo was very, very good, as we talked about in Civil War. And we'll get to Ego being a good one as well. And there's a couple of them in a row in these next couple of movies that are just like, man, these are some good antagonists. It's like, what, like, fucking just do this again, not this again, because God knows they're already paid by numbers as it is in some cases. But the point
You
is
didn't
that
like Mads Mikkelsen
huh?
in Doctor Strange? Mads Mikkelsen in Doctor Strange, Mr. Eyeshadow. I forgot his name already.
Icilius?
I don't think I ever. Oh, there we go. Yeah. He was good.
I take notes for these things. That's the only reason I remember any of these fucking names.
I'm gonna be comparing this movie to that a lot.
I really to Doctor Strange?
Yes, because it's the last one I watched, and there's reasons I didn't like it. There's reasons I like this movie because
Oh, okay.
it's the same
like,
reason I didn't like that movie.
The fuck? Okay. I was like, what the fuck? But anyway, let's get right into the thick of things. Oh, actually, before we get into that, on the chat real quick, Miss Vitropolis Megsy says, even if I originally needed to be talked into watching the 4th episode is heavy, referring to Moon Knight. I think 4th and 5th episode personally are the heaviest. Alpha says Dave Bautista in the background looks like he's drunk on a tirade. That's not too far off from Drax's character.
Wow, what's the blue guy's name? He looks like he's
Yondu?
committed some sort of sexual act.
Tim says Groot and Drax are the comedic relief. Gamora and her sister, that is Nebula, are building for their stories. True. Peter, Rocket, and Yondu are where the movie feels built around. Very true. Yep, that is pretty much the case right there, Tim. But let's
to
get
its benefit in my mind.
What's that?
To its benefit, like you said, it was a Peter Quill movie, and I still think it should be focused around him.
Yeah.
But I don't like I actually really like what they do with this movie and switch. Like there's a multitude of scenes he's not in at all. And they do character building that way. I also wanted to mention this. Did anybody else get like while watching this and we saw like the different like parts of the universe that they traveled to, I kind of at times I felt like Fifth Element vibes.
Yes.
Slightly, yeah.
Yes.
Thank God I wasn't alone. And also, this was the movie we should have fucking did edibles too.
Oh yeah, there was a couple scenes I forgot about. I'm like, ooh, yeah. I mean, listen. There's always next week. Guys, do a rewatch. But no, and just to be very clear, I'm not saying that was necessarily a bad thing in terms of it being like more Peter Quill focused. Not to say that everybody got like shunned for it, but there's actually a lot of pros to it because it helped establish him more. It helped kind of world build a lot more than I expected it to. But we'll get into the thick of things. Let's talk a little bit about the pre-production, the development, and all that fun jazz. So, of course, May of 2014, Disney CEO Bob Iger stated that he felt the first Guardians of the Galaxy film had strong franchise potential. No shit. He added that their goal was to create another set of Avengers. James Gunn, who of course directed and co-wrote the first film, said he would be returning for a sequel and that he was contractually obligated to if asked. Of course, next month, Feige said that there are places we can take the franchise and we have ideas of where we'd like to go based on the wide array of characters, worlds, and storylines from the comics. This is kind of what we were talking about. Like, we have a majority of the Marvel characters, right? We have Thor, we have Cap, we have all these other ones, but the majority of them, with Thor being kind of the only exception, Earthbound. Like, you're just stuck on Earth. And so going into Guardians of the Galaxy, and not even like necessarily directly associated with the Avengers at this point, really just opens up the creative envelope for Gunn and the entire team to kind of do almost anything they want, which is a huge plus, Of Of course, Gunn confirmed that all 5 original Guardians would return for a sequel, along with other supporting characters, and they released they announced the release date to 2017. The following months, Michael Rooker said he would return as Yondu and was looking forward to exploring new areas of the character. Chris Pratt, of course, confirmed the sequel would be one of his next projects. Bradley Cooper, Vin Diesel, all the others, of course, confirmed as well. In May, Gunn said the sequel would feature fewer characters than the first film, and they had planned to introduce 2 new major characters in the script: Mantis, who we see obviously later on in the film, and Adam Warlock. Dun dun dun. Or should I say gun, gun, gun?
Who has been cast?
Huh?
Who has been cast?
Mm-hmm. Talks had begun with an actor Gunn had in mind to portray Mantis, while he had decided to remove Warlock due to what?
Hi, my name is Mattress.
Mantis. While he decided to remove Warlock due to the film getting too busy, explaining one of the main things with the Guardians of the Galaxies is not to add a bunch of characters, not to make it bigger in that way, but to go deeper with the characters and getting to know them more emotionally. Everything is just getting too sprawling and too crazy for me. These superhero comic book movies. Gunn added, I adore what we had done with him. I think we did something really creative and unique with Adam Warlock, but it's one character too many. I didn't want to lose Mantis, and Mantis was more organically part of the movie anyway. So it seems like originally the plan was to introduce both of these characters, and I'll be very honest with you, considering the importance and the heavy, how powerful fucking Adam Warlock is, I am glad they did not introduce him in the movie.
It would have bloated the film so much right away. Like he's a character, from my understanding of the character, that would need... Like he's probably going to be featured very heavily in the third one.
I would imagine so. He's on level of power with Thanos. So if we're talking, and I'm very generously oversimplifying his character here.
He does get the Infinity Gauntlet, right?
Correct.
Like at some point, but I think he only has it for a little bit. I can't. I looked up his character because I was kind of confused, and I looked up like his powers and stuff. But he's pretty fucking powerful. Yeah,
it's like head of the table. Let's get him off the film. Like no. But I think the setup, which we'll talk about at the end, is perfect because it gets people super pumped and excited. And it goes back to the whole idea of like, well, you have this cosmic universe that you can now explore, and there's a shit ton you can do with it.
A couple things to Megsy's point. I wonder if they'll do a Guardians X-Men movie. That's actually the perfect crossover to introduce. What the fuck's that guy that was like? Remember X-Men when they went to space, and they had that guy with the little spider legs that was doing like a game show.
Oh fuck! I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and then there was also like Starman or some shit. He was like a celebrity in space.
You're talking about.
Modus? No.
Hold on. God damn it.
He was green,
I just found the name.
Spider
Mojo.
Legs, electronic spider leg. Yeah, Mojo. Was it Mojo?
Yeah, yellow character, no legs, but it's got like the...
I thought it was green. But it doesn't really matter. If he's got spider legs,
yeah,
then we're talking about the same person. But that would be like the right crossover to introduce, because X-Men do have times where they go into space, and it would make no sense.
I mean, it's comics,
just came out of nowhere.
Take it for what it's worth.
But yeah.
Hey, Logan, you're going to say thanks, bub, and then just pew.
I'm sure we're not going to go into depth about this scene, but did you see what Tim wrote about? Like he saw Thanos fighting somebody else.
I did hear something about that. And Basement, I just sent you a picture on Twitter of the character, and hopefully that's who you're thinking, who we're talking about, if we're on the same page here. Tim said,
yeah, he was green in the show. In the comic, I guess he's yellow. He's disgusting, is what he is.
It's like that character from Blade. You know the one I'm talking about?
Which character from Blade?
The one who gets like, who's so fat, and then the chick like sunbathes. Yeah.
He moved.
Tan. Yeah, he moved. Yeah. Yes. Tim says in the chat. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Thanos cameo during this movie during a scene fighting someone?
You can see the two purple people fighting on the planet, but I thought it was just people of his race. But it's too far away to see.
What it was.
It's we'll take some edibles and we'll let you know when we go back and watch it in super slow-mo. I mean, Possibly, but I mean, at the same time, it also doesn't fit the narrative of where we're gonna go with it. But I mean, it's possible. I mean, Marvel's known for doing so many Easter eggs, and if you notice on this show, I don't go into all the Easter eggs because Jesus fucking Christ, we would be here for 7 hours.
I mean, there's channels out there that spend 7 hours.
Yeah, go watch them. Well, watch us first, then go see them. Just trust me on that. But anyway, Gunn said he knew a lot of where he wanted to go in the sequel, having written the backstory of Peter Quill, his father, and the history with Yondu during the making of the first film, with the intention of exploring them in a future film. Gunn also wanted to give the sequel a different structure from the first film, since one of the reasons people like Guardians because it's fresh and different, so the second one will be fresh and different from the first one. Genius. Before starting on the script, Gunn hoped...
We've seen the same movie 50 times already.
Right.
And we may not want to see it again.
Before starting on the script, Gunn hoped to further explore Drax, Nebula, Kraglin, and the Collector and expand on Xandarian, Krillorian, and Ravager culture. He also hoped to introduce more female characters in the sequel, though wanted to avoid including Earthlings such as Carol Danvers, as well as the Nova Corps or Sam Alexander, saying, I think Quill being the only Earthling is important, that serves the entire movie-going audience and not just the handful of Nova and Carol Danvers fans. So, I mean, he clearly knew what the fuck he was doing, and it really just goes back to the idea of, why did they even fucking...
I'm sure half of this was like Disney being like, and who can you fit in this movie so that we can tell a bit of their story and introduce them to the rest of the MCU? But it's like, man, you start doing that and you start losing story and just have cameos.
I will say that, like, not all the time, but sometimes Kevin Feige will rein that shit in. Again, not every time. Strange, but you know, he will, horrible cough, he will rein in you know, like those like shoving things in there to let to for the sake of putting the characters in there and more focus on the individual story. Not always.
It detracts from most movies I've ever seen. I mean, fan service is one thing, and sometimes you can fit it in where it's like in for instance, in this movie, there is a time where they show some things, and that we're just talking about one that you can do and have it organically work with the movie you're fucking making. Yep. Instead of like take a break from the movie and go there.
Right. So that being said, let's get into the movie proper. So we actually kick off with
0 out of 10.
What? Did you say 0 out of 10?
Yep.
Spoilers. We kick off with a flashback. Missouri, planet Earth in 1980. We see Meredith Quill, played by Laura Haddock, is riding in a car listening to tunes on the radio with her boyfriend, played by Kurt Russell, whom she calls her spaceman. They go behind a Dairy Queen and run to the woods, where the man shows Meredith a small alien seedling, which he says will eventually be all over the place, and has a romantic embrace with Meredith. We cut to 34 years later. We see, of course, our good old friends, the Guardians of the Galaxy. Peter Quill, played by Chris Pratt. Gamora. We see Drax, Rocket Raccoon, and of course Baby Groot, still voiced by Vin Diesel, are standing on the platform as they try to secure Anolax batteries from their latest employers, the Sovereigns. The Guardians have their weapons ready as they gear up into battle an interdimensional beast known as an Obelisk. I hope I'm saying that right. The Obelisk descends, leading the Guardians to spring into action, except for Groot, who is jamming out to Mr. Blue Sky on a speaker that Rocket set up, all while the others are trying to annihilate the Obelisk. This probably is one of my favorite intro title sequences out of every Marvel movie that we've watched, where you see Groot dancing around the platform while avoiding the monster, and all the fucking chaos is going on in the background. I
attacking random bugs.
Yep, I fucking loved it.
I love the reason I like it is because most Marvel movies up to this point have had this huge action sequence where you're like in the action and you're the camera following everybody and everything's so intense, where this is like, yeah, we're going to do that, but are we really?
It sets the tone very well.
It was a good like subversion of what Marvel usually does. And I got to say, Kurt Russell as like some fucking intense cum pits, whatever the fuck they're called. Yeah, the Dimple Master. Also, like I was thinking, like as soon as they went by the Dairy Queen and jumped out, and he's like, "Come, hurry!" I'm like, he's gonna fucking kill this girl.
No, well, spoilers.
You're my spaceman. It's like I
Uh,
don't know. He's dragging you into the forest.
I
This is
just
how like
I mean
most murders start.
the setup was how do I say this? The setup for this kind of reminded me a little bit of the setup of the first one, right? Where it's like you're told something important or you're shown something at the very beginning, but it's not fully fleshed out until later on in the movie, which they kind of sort of did in the first one too, with like the orb and then the Infinity Stones and, you know, Ronan and all that stuff. It's a little bit more subtle per se in this one, I think, compared to the first one. But still, you know, they didn't linger too long on it. It was just enough of the flashback to like, cool, got it, understand, boom, cool,
Yeah,
move on to present day.
they'll set up. I mean, any movie will do this, and a lot of people will harp on it as like, oh, it's obvious foreshadowing. You can't have a good story without foreshadowing. You just won't.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying is that they didn't linger on it too long. I think it was just the right amount of time.
And it makes sense later on in the film that they didn't really show a lot between
Right.
Kurt Russell and fucking what's her face.
Correct. But yeah, I think the title sequence and the intro credits just help set the tone for the whole movie too, where it's like you see Baby Groot dancing and you see like fucking Peter's getting tossed, raccoons getting tossed, Drax getting tossed, all sorts of craziness is going on.
I also had like this monster like shooting out like chromatic spray or something, like rainbows coming out of its fucking mouth.
Basically.
I'm like, I don't understand exactly what it's doing to these people.
So
I'm gonna shoot rainbows at you, motherfucker.
Yeah, but it's, you know, typical Tuesday. Drax ends up falling on the speaker to Groot's dismay, and since they cannot harm the obelisk from the outside, Drax tries to kill it from inside by allowing it to swallow him. Star-Lord then notices a cut on the monster's neck and orders Rocket to get it to look up. Gamora then slices the obelisk downward, killing it and letting Drax spill out of the hole. I cannot stress enough how much Drax is my favorite fucking character in this entire movie. It's all the charm and all the... It's all the charm and the great comedic moments from the first movie amplified, but also done at the right, again, just like the right moments of when to do it. So it's not like overdone.
It's also like a giant muscular man baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
basically.
it works perfectly in a movie that's already like essentially a comedy. Like I would say this is a comedy slash action slash
I mean, it
sci-fi.
basically is, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it definitely works here. Where like at least he's not fucking quipping.
Yeah.
Finally, some comedy that's not like these snarky quips.
It feels more natural, yeah.
Yeah.
The Guardians then bring the batteries back to the Sovereigns and meet with their High Priestess Aisha. I hope I'm saying that right. In exchange for the batteries, the Sovereigns deliver Gamora's sister Nebula to the Guardians so that they can take her to Xandar and collect the bounty that's on her head. Before they leave, Aisha talks down to the Guardians, but Peter in particular, noting his half-human, half-alien heritage, gives him something she deems reckless. The Guardians leave, with Rocket swiping some of the batteries for himself. So first off, I want to talk about like just the general setup with the Sovereigns and everything. But on top of that, going back to the Drax thing, his fucking laugh is just fantastic too, especially when Groot or when Rocket shows him that he stole the batteries. Just I don't know, just shit like that.
I mean, even when he's in the he jumps into the monster and like 2 seconds later just cuts him, stabbing it and doing absolutely nothing.
Night, thanks you for popping on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for showing up. His character works perfect in this because he's pretty much one note, but it's when you play that note that matters. So like he definitely does. He adds a lot to the movie for being, and even like storyline wise at times, like they do stuff with his character for his character not being too fleshed out. They do things that are subtle that I like with him later on.
Yes. I
also like what did you the sovereign people? I'm thinking like Jersey Shore meets Kardashians, and that's their entire race.
Yep.
when they get those fucking like little bikes later on. It's time for spin class.
Oh my god.
And they just had to put like an image of their face on their little ships. What's the benefit?
I feel like they invented Instagram.
Camera. Yeah, they're like, yeah. Are they naturally gold or do they paint themselves?
No, they're naturally that way. So the Sovereigns are a very powerful race, and you know, kind of like what we're talking about, future setups and other things they can do in the cosmic universe of
I like the
Marvel.
Chads though. They feel like the Chads of the universe.
Holy shit, you're not wrong.
Planet
It's just
Chad.
yeah. But again, it's just little shit that's like, oh, plant the seed for. Sorry for yawning. Plant the seeds for other things that's happening in the future, and so this was a perfect opportunity for them to just do just the right amount. But yeah, they're fucking they are the Chad Kardashians of MCU for sure.
Oh my god! And she like he was like, I prefer
I don't think
having
they
sex.
blink.
And she was like, well, maybe he'll show me.
But by the way, I also need to stress this too. I'm obviously making comparisons to this with, um, Peacemaker, Suicide Squad, Slither. It seems James Gunn has a knack for the bizarre in the sense of he knows what to accentuate and what to make different enough so that you understand a new species, for lack of a better word, with very minimal interaction / information, which I
think the
found.
guy probably plays like a lot of Dungeons and Dragons.
What I was about to say was,
And
I would
honestly,
love to see him do a Star Trek series.
because he's great at like world building and he puts a lot of effort into a glimpse of something you'll see, which is why I said the comparison for Fifth Element. Like there's a scene later on where when I get to it, I'll tell you.
Okay. But what do you think so far of the setup with the Sovereigns and the opening stuff and just them like being, stealing stuff?
They got a lot done in a little time. Like they set the theme for where the movie's going to be with just the intro,
Right.
which is great use of your time for a movie. They also have the setup for Rocket Raccoon stealing the batteries, and the rest of them not knowing, and what the sovereign people are, because you could tell immediately they were fucking Chads of the universe.
Chad Kardashians.
And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the startup, and I also like the fact that like it starts with them fighting some gigantic fucking tentacle monster.
I mean, there isn't really too much to set up because the first movie kind of established them so well that it's like, okay, we really don't need to spend too much time. Let's just go right into it, for lack of a better word, Yeah, there isn't really much chance. Like it's like, oh, we're here. Here's what we've been up to, and it's not like
I don't understand why they hired them to protect it, considering they have a fleet of spin classes.
Fleet of spin classes.
They remind me. Have you ever played StarCraft?
Yes.
They were the protons or what?
Yeah. Yep. You are completely right on that one.
That fucking blimp that like births all those little shits. Yeah.
That is them.
I guarantee James Gunn has played it as well.
So we'll get Heather's thoughts when she gets back in here in just a second. But on the way to the planet Xandar, the Guardians are suddenly met by a fleet of Sovereign drones, all going after them for the stolen batteries. The others figure it was Rocket that took them, and so of course they're naturally all pissed off. The drones start attacking as Rocket tries to steer the Milano toward a wormhole that would lead them to another planet. But in the distance, another craft passes by and starts to destroy the Sovereign drones. A man appears to stand on his ship and wave to the Guardians, and the Guardians escape the drones but must crash land on a nearby planet. As the Guardians observe the wreckage of their ship, the other ship that saved them descends. Stepping out is Ego, who reveals himself to be none other than Peter's father. With him is an empathetic, wow, why can't I say this fucking word? Empathetic assistant, Jesus Christ, empathetic assistant named Mantis.
Man.
So, I don't mean this in a bad way, but I was like, wow, okay, we're just right into this pretty much right off the get-go, which I'm not against. I'm just kind of shocked that they kind of like started this whole, I don't say big reveal, but I mean, considering that's pretty much the premise of this movie. Yeah, we're off to a start here.
It was, I mean, the whole, like, the scene goes on for quite a while, a bit too long in my mind, of the
chase?
The space battle.
Yeah.
And also she's like, we're 46 clicks. I'm like, what? Do you really use clicks in space?
Yeah.
Maybe, I guess. But yeah, the fight goes on for too long, and the battle back and forth. I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to show the division between Rocket Raccoon and Peter Quill, and it's gonna make sense a lot more later on for where Raccoon goes, like his story arc goes. But I just hated the idea, like what the fuck, like it's kind of it irked me a little bit that they're like able to switch back and forth control. It's like you have to be the best pilot in the world. It's like,
Oh, you
well,
mean you mean
yeah,
like
when they
the mini conflict between Peter Quill and Rocket Raccoon while they're trying to avoid the
which
Sovereigns. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
essentially is like I'm okay with dying at this point.
By the
It's
way,
like I get the movie's like it's a comedy, but like that was a bit like a
well,
bit too
I
much.
will say that the Sovereigns are probably one of the smartest people in the sense of like, yeah, no, we're not going to let our people go out there and die. Let's have them send fucking drones out. I'm like,
But let's have those drones have our images on them. Like, why? In what world is that needed? This is why they're
Chad Kardashian
Chads.
world. That's the way it fucking works.
I'm like, and nobody's gonna fucking even see your spaceship, man.
I mean, you'd be surprised.
And then you had the whole Drax like flying up the back of the spaceship, like
You get the right
on an
selfie
umbilical
angle,
cord.
you know?
Which is like this was like this to me like I enjoyed the beginning a bit more than this part because this part holds true to the old Marvel adage of like big explosions and craziness and insanity and nothing that makes any logical sense.
Big
But
lasers.
it's not gonna hurt this movie as much because the movie's set in fucking space in fantasy land.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind. I didn't mind it too much. I mean, I get where you're coming from in the sense of like it might have dragged on a little bit too long. Also, the whole idea of coincidence and like plot convenience. The fact that he found him there, but we'll get to that. As far as like they didn't really say exactly how Ego found him per se, other than he just heard about this. We'll get into there.
I didn't think you needed the back and forth in the spaceship as the divide. You already had the divide in him stealing the batteries and telling nobody and basically going into business for himself. The back and forth just put further into it, but it also hurt some of the
Well,
movie for me a
you
little
have to
bit.
remember too that like Rocket and Peter spend a good amount of time at the beginning of the movie away from each other.
Yeah, but I just
So,
don't think you needed that extra oomph
eh,
to set because you could have landed on the crash landed on the planet like they end up doing anyway. I just have like say Peter locks him out and he's not able to control at all, and then they crash anyway, and then they bring it up like they don't normally do. You just hit the same story beats, but like the back and forth driving thing, it's a nitpick, but it's like
no, I get you.
you wouldn't really nobody would fucking do that.
So Heather, at this point, we've caught up with, they've taken the ship, they're taking the batteries. The Sovereigns are chasing them. Ego cuts them off. They crash land, and Ego does the reveal of "I am your father." What'd you think of like the opening sequence with like the Sovereigns, the chase, the crash? I was kind of surprised at how quickly they reveal like, "Hey, I'm Ego. I'm your dad." What? But maybe it kind of fit the pacing of the movie.
It fit the pacing of the movie and those fucking golden perfectionists. It's just like
It's the Chad Kardashians of the
Yeah, they're
universe.
Chad Kardashians of the universe. It's fucking so true.
it really is. And the chase scene with them basically playing a video game in order to kill these guys. It's just like,
Reminded me of Ready Player One.
yeah,
Not wrong.
it, it, it was just like, come on, really? But for the most part, it's a good opening, and just getting blasted in the face with, oh, this is truly going to be his entire backstory. Got it.
I mean, yeah, I was kind of in the same like, oh, we're already like, we obviously knew it was coming because most of us, I think, before even seeing this, knew what the movie, what happened in the movie. But I just kind of forgot,
knew
like, oh wow,
nothing about
it was
movie
kind of quick.
going into it.
What?
Going into it the first time, I knew nothing about this movie at all. I had no idea where they were gonna go or what they were gonna do. I wasn't listening to any like hype train or anything like that. So this was like, in a sense, I actually enjoyed watching it the second time more than the first time because the first time I was expecting the same or similar movie to the first one I watched, and this is at times similar, but at times very different.
Well, you can appreciate new things about it the second time around.
Yeah, and the second time around, actually, well, after Doctor Strange, I feel I mean, Doctor Strange is not a terrible movie, but I
was
just like
hollow.
it angered me so much.
Well, if you want to hear Basement's full rage, go make sure you listen to the last episode of the Marvel Roundtable. But
Magic, bitch.
But that being said, on another planet, we see Yondu Udanta, played by, of course, by the wonderful Michael Rooker, and his teams of the Ravagers have fallen on hard times. He's staying in a nearby hotel, where, of course, we see another cameo from Howard the Duck. Yondu spots his old comrade Stakar Ogor. God, these fucking names. Stakar, played by none other than Sylvester Stallone, who is Yondu. What are you doing here, Yondu? Who was exiled Yondu from the Ravager team for child trafficking. Among the Ravagers is Taserface, played by Chris Sullivan, who thinks the Ravagers need a new leader, along with Kraglin, Sean Gunn, who was in the first one, and obviously brother of James Gunn, who has since also come to question Yondu's leadership. After Yondu finishes talking to Stakar, the Sovereigns arrive, and Aisha approaches Yondu with a proposition. I actually really, really, really like this scene, and this goes back to what I said earlier about the production notes, where it's like James Gunn knew all the information and knew what he wanted to tell as a story from the first movie when he wrote the first movie. And now it's kind of like, oh, everything falls into place correctly. Like, okay, you understand that, okay, yeah, Yondu was technically an outcast of the Ravagers. Why? Because he took a child. I wonder what child. Like, you obviously can put two and two together really fucking quickly. And this scene made me really appreciate that more, because it's relatively simple, easy to understand, and built off of just enough from the first one where it's like, oh, that makes all the sense in the world for now.
I got a lot to say.
Yeah,
Heather,
yes.
you can go first. I got a lot to say about this scene, but Heather, you can go first.
There's a lot going on in this scene, but it's all right in the face. It's quick to the point with a lot of the different things that they go to with it. And it's just finally we get a Marvel movie where they're doing decent character building that's not just the main character.
Yep.
We're getting the backstories of side characters that we all love. I mean, we all love Yondo. Come on. He's honestly one of the best bad guys to be not a bad guy.
Yep.
He's one of the best parts of this movie.
He is.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that.
So this scene is the scene that this is when I first I actually felt the Fifth Element vibe, because this scene is, though it's short, it's so well constructed. We go to a place we've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
The place looks like a northern shithole version of Las Vegas, and the fact that it's basically Sex City, and they're all sex bots.
Yep.
Right, everything there is a sex bot, and they have like this one woman. I guess there's an actual woman there that I think runs the whole thing, but it's a bunch of sex bots. And I just love the fact that like we're going to like, these guys are the bad guys, but they're all basically like, the first time we see Yondu, he's zipping up his pants. So they're insinuating that the guy just banged a sex robot. And did you guys? I don't know if he's introduced yet, but did you guys catch Diebeard? Diebeard from Peacemaker. He's in this movie. He's got a lot of talking points.
Oh yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, it took me a second. Yes, I was gonna make a mention of that later on. Like, oh yeah, Diebeard was heavily in this movie, which is like,
You can see his mannerisms, even though he acts a completely different character.
Once I heard the voice, I'm like, oh, that's right.
I'm like, who is this? Yeah. No, but this does a great job of setting up Yondu's character, and it's so important. And it's not only is his character important, but this scene is so important to making this movie that much better. Any scene that they take away from the Guardians of the Galaxy, I almost always love. Like the actual main core group, and I like them too, but like every other thing, it's just a breath of fresh air from Marvel. Because half the time I feel like I'm going to go, oh, we're gonna leave this scene to watch one of the other Avengers. But like now we're seeing side characters, and the side characters are getting development. That's the key word that a lot of these movies don't seem to do.
Yeah, I mean, with Yondu specifically, we had this preconceived notion of who he was from the first movie. We heard about things about him from his relationship with Peter. We never saw any of it. And so the big takeaway for me was, oh shit, he's humbled, he's groveling, it's a moment of weakness that we didn't see from the first one. But again, very easy to follow. They do pack a lot of it in there, but it instantly gave you the idea of, oh, there is more than what we saw from the first movie, and obviously that's going to be a semi main thread in this whole thing. So fucking love this scene.
It shows you how much you can pack into a small amount of time that can greatly affect your movie moving forward. They hit all the beats. This is like they do everything as good as it could be done for this scene. No wasted time. Everything makes sense. Things we didn't even know about, like about the Ravagers, right?
Yes.
That their culture or how they operate
Mhm.
are shown in what amounts to a 10-minute scene.
Yeah, basically.
So it's fucking crazy.
Tis good shit. But then we have to go back to the main cast. So, no, I'm kidding. So Peter, Quill, is obviously still in shock to finally be meeting his actual father. Ego explains that he sent Yondu to pick Peter up after his mother died. Peter also still didn't understand why Ego left his mom in the first place, but doesn't quite give his full answer as of yet. He invites Peter and his friends to his planet, which Peter is hesitant about going to until Gamora convinces him to join his father. Peter, Gamora, and Drax then go with Ego and Mantis, while Rocket and Groot stay behind to fix the Milano and keep an eye on Nebula, who is still their prisoner. On Ego, oops, and my notes just jumped. Jesus. Need new
Notes?
Notes? Yeah, notes.
I know you have them.
Notes and hose.
I actually have like 5 words written down.
Oh no, I have 4 pages. So on Ego's ship, the three talk to Mantis, who shows off her powers by seeing into their minds. She lets everyone know that Peter has sexual feelings for Gamora, which Drax finds hilarious. I don't give a shit. Fucking love the scene. I know it was trailer fodder, but I mean, again, just it makes me. It's another scene I just love. I love Drax's moments. You're like a big muscular man child. The other thing I will say is that despite that, we don't get. And I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here. Even though Mantis isn't really much in this movie, to be very honest.
She serves a pretty important purpose.
She does.
She said what?
She serves an important purpose. Like her purpose is front and center in this movie.
Well, yeah, I should say more in the future, but I should say more in terms of like character development. But I still enjoyed her.
She's supposed to be a lost puppy dog, basically.
Yeah, but I still enjoy her because, and this is one of the things that I liked about this, even though she's added on to the film and added on to part of the Guardians of the Galaxy, she's another unique personality that is different from everybody else. Forget like the physical attribute. What's that?
She's also kind of like what they do good in this. They have the characters that they want to delve in deep with, and those are Peter, Quill, Rocket Raccoon, Yondu, and Gamora, and to an extent Nebula. But then they have Mantis and Drax, who are both very similar, though they're very different.
Right.
They're similar character types, and you kind of need them for like plot purposes, but also for like in Drax's case, it's comedic relief. In Mantis's case, it's actually like insight into characters that you wouldn't get without her ability.
Which basically. The two of them together are just fucking gold.
Yeah, it's great.
And I know we're jumping ahead, but it made me think of that scene from Infinity War. What do they do exactly? We take ass and kick names. That's right. No.
It's sometimes like certain people just work really well together in like movies and TV shows, and those two definitely have it.
She brings in that naiveness.
They're both naive, right? Her and Drax.
Brings that naiveness to the more innocent naiveness than Drax.
I was gonna say Drax is not naive. He's literal. He's not naive though. I don't think he's.
I guess naive is I mean, I feel like the innocent optimism and sheltered is what I would say Mantis, where I would say Drax is like the typical idea of what you'd think a barbarian would be.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
boisterous, literal, and like
basically.
not necessarily emotionless, but all of his emotions he says
He's
Yeah.
dumb
for
Thor.
the most part. Yeah, which is cool.
I think
Tracy
it's
said Rise
brutish
of
to
Galactus. Galactus eventually will be there in some
I
extent,
mean,
but
Tracy, we could do a whole nother episode of like where we think shit could go and all that stuff, and we could be talking about that for
ever.
hours. But I think we need to finish up what's out there first before we get into any more speculations. But no, I just wanted to mention that about Mantis, since I don't know if we'll have much time to talk about her development other than that. But so the
I
Ravagers.
did like I don't know before we move on. I did like the fact that Quill did not believe him at first
Mhm.
because it's like the guy shows up out of nowhere at this point and
Mhm.
it's like, but why now and why this and why how? And he's like, man, I did like that instead of just like, Dad,
Yeah.
yeah, which was it was a good touch because I mean, if anything, his character is in search for like family. The home that's what they get at with the Guardians of the Galaxy, right?
I mean,
But like,
it fits with his concept of like, well, he just went through, especially with all the shit he went through in the first movie, so it
yeah,
kind of makes sense. The Ravagers come across the woods and where the Guardians crash landed, and most of them end up walking in traps laid out by Rocket until Yondu shows up with his Yaka arrow controlled through his whistling. Loved seeing the Ravagers getting fucking just like gravity shot up in the fucking air, and in the moonlight you just see their bodies flying all over the place. The Ravagers get Groot and Rocket, but when Taserface plans to get Peter as well, Yondu isn't quite as willing to turn him over. Nebula then breaks the crust on Yondu's head to knock him out, and she aligns herself with the Ravagers as they take Rocket, Groot, and Yondu as prisoner. Dun dun dun. Yeah, I love the scene of just like the visuals of like Rocket just fucking with all the Ravagers and just like all.
Having the time of his life doing it.
Yeah, I got Suicide Squad flashbacks when I saw that. I mean, obviously, I know this movie came out before, but like, there was a lot. Like, you could easily see the James Gunn isms in this very clearly.
it's so needed for where they want to go with Rocket's character. Like
Mhm.
it to see like the extent of what he can do, even by like he's
Bare
basically
minimum, no less.
the guy is basically main character class, just like Peter Quill is, right?
Yeah,
So like that, it's nice to see that, and the fact that he's a fucking raccoon and a CGI monster is, and they make me like actually like look past that.
he's a trash panda.
Yeah,
Is that better?
but
I think it's better. It's so not better.
yeah, his destruction, he fucking decimates people in this.
Without killing anybody, he just
Yeah.
fucking
And
tosses
it's
there.
smartly done, and he uses his like advantage for size and fucking everything. So I actually this is an action scene I really got behind.
Someone did make a comment that he's like a genius Dennis the Menace.
Yes.
He's like Batman, but a raccoon.
He's basically a more grown-up version of Kevin
McAllister.
McAllister, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Instead of
basically.
having like tarantulas, he has like prototype nuclear bombs for some reason.
The Home Alone series, the movies where Joe Pesci tries not to swear in a kids movie. Um, Heather, what'd you think of the craziness with the Ravagers and Rocket and all that stuff?
It was needed. This is the one thing that I absolutely adore about the Guardians of the Galaxy movies is you get the good balance of the slower scenes that don't feel slow and the action scenes that are not cut to 1,000 fucking pieces and you're jumping to 6 different directions in half
We'll
of
get
a
there.
second.
We'll get there.
100%. I 100% agree with you, Heather. It didn't feel like I'm telling you, like most of the Marvel movies that we've watched up until this point, it feels like now we got our action scene, now we're gonna get our story building slow scene,
Hmm.
then it's gonna be everything just seems like here's this block, here's this block, here's this block. Where this movie is, there's more flow throughout it because I feel like the theme stays consistent. Yeah, they get even when they get to like serious notes, it's never super serious where like some of the Marvel movies have gone that way, and then the next fucking scene is them quipping about some bullshit.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing that also I and this is gonna be an ironic statement, but um doing it the way they do it makes the action scenes have more weight to them.
Yes.
And which is ironic because it's almost like they're, I mean, they obviously do serious moments, but the non-serious ones also, you know, it kind of, the action scenes mostly cut the bullshit out and they just go right for, you know what I mean? Like it's such a mood change, and it makes the final, more specifically the final action scenes, obviously mean so much more as opposed to just up there here. Hey-ya!
Yeah.
This action scene too specifically is like,
This
it's
is a funny one because, you know,
it's gadget driven, but it's also like sly stealth that you normally
it's
don't
slapstick
see.
too.
But yeah, they the things, they include some of the core feel of the movie and everything they do in this movie. So you never feel like I'm like waves hitting me, waves of comedy, and then waves of something else, and then waves of comedy. No, it's almost like a fucking flow of pretty much the same idea.
Yeah. Um, this is actually another great scene I love here. So Ego brings everyone to the planet that literally lives through him, as Ego is a celestial. Foreshadowing. And his consciousness is the core of the planet. He explains to the three that he came up with a human form to travel the galaxy, and he came to Earth and fell in love with Meredith, but could not see her so often because it would take up a lot of his energy. Peter continues to hold hostile feelings for Ego for leaving Meredith alone to die. As Peter grows more emotional, his hands produce powerful energy that is linked to Ego's own power. Ego shows him how to control and use it. So a little bit more flushing out of what exactly Ego's all about, where he's talking about how he wanted to explore and realize that he was alone. He wanted to explore and see other life. I love the fact that Drax just asked him straight up if he had a penis. Fucking, I died. I just, again, fuck it. I'm gonna tell you guys every like two moments how much I love his character.
I mean, there's like, I enjoyed most of what he said, but there's one moment in this movie where I actually did laugh out loud. We're not there yet, but it did happen.
It was too.
Yeah, but didn't you find it? This guy has a fight. He's like, "Welcome to my planet, and here is the history of me." Like, I mean, it makes sense for his
You
character.
have all the time in the world.
His name is fucking Ego.
Yeah,
I know it makes sense for him, but like, if I was any of those characters, it'd be like red flag, red flag, red flag,
Crimson. But
wait, are we at the part where he, like, you said he showed him how to harness the powers? This is where like they play catch.
Playing
Yes.
catch with the energy ball.
Yeah.
That was kind of cringy for me because I know he
it
alluded
was,
to
but
it earlier, and it made no sense.
well, it was a reference to a line earlier in the movie.
I know, but like when he said it earlier in the movie, it made no sense because he was kidnapped.
Well, it was. I think.
And where was he seeing people play catch? On the Ravager's ship?
In prison.
Oh God, I hate you.
I'm not saying it's not cringy. It's just I get why they did it.
It's just like as soon as he said catch, I was like, in the galaxy?
You have to understand, he was not kidnapped as a baby. He was an older child when he was kidnapped, so he could have very easily seen
yeah,
kids in his
that's
neighborhood
true.
playing catch.
For some reason, I was
Fuck
thinking,
you,
like,
basement. No, I'm just kidding.
as soon as I hear kidnapped, it's like robbing that cradle. But then again, he was on. How long was he on there? Because he does say like he saw his mom die and shit like that. So he had to be what, like
He was like 8 or
early
10. I think.
teens?
You know
No,
what?
he was like
I want to say 12.
Hold
he
on.
was young, but not that young. And he's like 8 to 12 around there.
So in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, he was 34. I think he said 9, right? I think he said
It's somewhere between. It's like about to hit puberty.
I want to say he was 9. I thought for sure that he said in the first movie he was 9.
I'm going 8 to 12 and living with it.
Oh God, I have to look this up now. Fuck my notes.
Well, it doesn't
Tell
really
me
matter.
nothing.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Just as long as the 8 to 12, the
Right.
age makes sense for what I was talking about. Anyways.
So while this is all going on the Ravager ship, Taserface and his goons start ejecting those who are still loyal to Yondu, except for Kraglin, who only watches in disbelief.
Says he was 8 years old.
Damn, I thought it was 9. When Taserface boasts of this greatness and fearful name, Rocket only mocks him. Nebula enters and suggests that the Ravagers turn in their captives to the Kree for the bounties on their head, and she also makes other demands, including a new hand. Kraglin, of course, brings her to a ship that she uses to get off the Ravager ship and to go and find Gamora. Taserface. Best name ever.
Yeah. Taserface. It's more metaphorical.
I just he goes, I will kill you. Yeah, well, it's better than living with a name than having to walk up every single day in the mirror and call myself Taserface.
Taserface was pretty good.
That's just a fun that there's another like
Taserface was no joke though. I'm not gonna lie.
He was vicious.
He got some fucking balls on him.
I do like scenes like that, and again, this is another James Gunnism where it's like you say something and then everyone's just kind of like everyone stops, like almost hear like the record player go off the needle, and they just like go off on like what seems like a normal conversation, right? It's kind of like from the first Guardians where they're like, "This is my plan," and Rocket laughs. He's like, That is the most real, authentic, genuine laugh of my entire life because that is not a plan; it's barely a concept." Like that kind of like natural conversation. What's that?
Do you feel like a level of, not to Peacemaker's extent, but a level of improv?
Yeah, like
loose improv. I'm gonna say like
Step
they have
Brothers-esque.
their talking points, but they can like manipulate a bit.
Like Step Brothers. That's the kind of vibe you know what I mean? Like those kind of like even like Superbad, like movies like that have like those comedic moments where it's like, here's the situation, go react.
This is the idea we want you to get across. How you get that across is kind of up to you,
right?
As long as it actually comes across.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean yes. And also to Taserface's fucking gratitude, how many times have we seen Marvel movies where they have these side bad guys that have no personality or nothing at all? Nothing. This created something out of nothing.
Off the wall.
Yeah. The attention to detail is where this movie succeeds.
I mean, Heather, are you a fan of Taserface?
I am a big fan of Taserface. I mean, as Basement has already said, I mean, we get so many side characters that are bad guys that are just like, okay, bad guy number 3.
Yep. Yeah, basically.
And then we get Taserface, who is just, I am my own personality. You are going to listen to me.
That's what I mean. We'll get there, but that's kind of what annoys me about Thanos' crew when he shows up.
We'll get there. We will get there. Just 3 more movies and we'll get there. 3 more.
Just wanted to say it now because I know I won't remember when it happened.
So, kind of talking what we were talking about earlier. At this point, Mantis and Drax form a bond, though Drax continues to remind Mantis when he finds her that he finds her hideous. But it is a good thing because he thinks that he is hideous as well, and still managed to find someone else that loved him for who he is. Mantis says that she needs to tell Drax something important, but Gamora interrupts things, and Mantis keeps quiet, instead just taking the two, of course, to their room. So again, it's that natural chemistry between the two of them. Just like, you are horrifying to look at, but it is a good thing because that means they like you for who you are. I also especially love later on when Mantis wakes up Drax and he like gags.
They do say like there's a point in this movie where he's like, "Is that because I'm wise?" Drax says, and it's like he's kind of wise. He's just literal, and that could be taken shitty.
Yeah,
some of he says it's like you're not wrong, but you're not right either. But this was a good interaction between the two, and I mean, this is the point where there's things told about Drax's character that take no time to do. They don't elaborate; they just go into like his emotional state of being, right? This is that moment.
Yeah, and you know what? Thank you for bringing that up. I think this is the moment where he's looking out into the planet and he's thinking about his wife and his daughter.
He's like,
Mantis
I used to take my daughter to the pools or something.
What's that?
He's like, I used to take my daughter to these pools remind me of a place I used to take my daughter.
And that's when Mantis touches his shoulder and she starts like...
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's so subtle.
Yep.
They don't need to, I don't need a huge I really don't ever need a huge backstory on Drax for everything. I don't need to see it. But just that subtle touch adds a lot to a character that is one-dimensional but can be multi-dimensional when you give it the chance.
Sometimes less is more.
I mean, most times less is more, and that's my gripe with a lot of these movies. They seem to think more is more.
I mean, did you take the same thing away from that, Heather, or is it just meh?
There is something happening to her.
I can't hear anything anybody is saying, so give me
Oh,
one second.
Well, that would explain that then.
Yeah, that was great.
So while Heather attempts to listen to us some way somehow, we'll move on the story here. So the Ravagers throw Rocket and Yondu in a cell while they take Groot for their own entertainment. Pretty fucked up, actually. They like dress him up in a Ravager's outfit, like pour booze on him, and then fucking step on him, the poor little guy. Yondu mentions...
Indestructible, right?
Huh?
Like, he's indestructible, right? Like Groot?
Well, it's I mean...
I guess if you lit him on fire, he'd die. He's a tree.
I mean, he survived the crash and they regrew him. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, they don't, it's a power they don't really fully explain. But Yondu mentions how he was Kree a battle slave before Stakar pulled him out and made him a Ravager. And when Rocket asks why Yondu kept Peter around, he insists because Peter was small enough to fit in spaces where the others couldn't, exactly what Peter said in the first movie. The two then resolve to work together and to break out of there. They get Groot to come by, and Yondu tells him to get a prototype fin for his head, which is more comic accurate, easy for me to say. And of course, this is just a fun scene where, like, after bringing a bunch of different wrong items, including one guy's eye, where Rocket's like, no, keep the eye, because when he wakes up, he's not gonna fucking have it. And it's like belly laughing. He finally gets Yondu's fin and it gets him and Rocket out. Yondu sends the arrow through every mutinous Ravager they come across, with which Rocket and Groot get in and get some Ravager ass kicking themselves. The three then board an escape ship with the Kraglin, but not before Yondu sets the whole ship to blow up. Taserface gets hit with the flames, but he manages to notify Aisha to Yondu's whereabouts before he gets to go down with the ship, which again I love because like make sure you let them know that they were they were brought down by Taserface, and she like right before the fucking thing explodes.
Fucking Taserface.
Heather, you good now?
Yep, I think our speakers just died.
Ah, damn. So
actually, it might be our extender here.
So the first question I was asking was about the scene between like Mantis and Drax, where like you see the two of them going back and forth, and then obviously I went into this whole scene about Yondu and Rocket's escape with the help of Groot. Leave the eye, no, because if he wakes up, he won't fucking have it.
It's too fucking great. I mean, it tried to tell Groot what he needs to get, and him coming back with 20 different items that are not what they need.
Oh yeah, the toe.
Fucking great. Fucking great. I mean, it's like, this is exactly what living with a toddler is like. It's spot fucking on. My God. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I forgot about the toe. Tim mentioned in the chat the toe. It's like, yeah, please tell me you guys have a pile of toes somewhere in a refrigerator. Nope. We're just going to forget about that then. No, you need to get the fin. Basement, what'd you think about this part?
A couple things, actually. Outside of like the comedic aspect of him bringing things, I like the fact that they don't actually pay off him getting the item, and instead they have Sean Gunn, I think his name.
Yes, yeah.
Sean Gunn help out, which made sense because he was always like on Yondu's side. I just don't know why he wasn't killed with the rest of them, because he seemed like, I guess he played his cards right.
Yep.
But whatever. The one thing I'll say, like visually, the scene where he's like throwing the arrow through everybody, and it like zooms out and it shows it, and it has like scenes where it goes completely black and shows like the red arrow going through people, and like visually, this movie is pretty fucking stunning. This movie for me is actually more stunning visually than Doctor Strange.
I agree with you.
Because Doctor Strange tends to reuse the one stunning effect they have too much, where this is like a lot of it's like color based, but it's also like everything that they're doing is explained to an extent. Like he can control the arrow. It's like in Doctor Strange when they're folding over towers and shit, I don't really understand. But that scene, like where they zoom out and they show everybody getting killed by the arrow, that looked really cool, and they had like the trail of the arrow. That was nice. One thing I did, they're in like the control room in the middle, and like all of a sudden, Rocket Raccoon just starts firing. I get he's looking at like the cameras, but you wouldn't really still be able to like. Come on,
No.
I couldn't look at a camera and shoot through a wall and kill somebody. It's just in an unfamiliar place because
He's
not
that damn
familiar.
good.
Yeah, main character.
Right.
But it was a good scene. All in all, it was maybe I think the Groot scene went on a bit too long.
Also, the fact that they blew up everything of the ship except that part, and they just squeaked by. Like, did anybody else think that was a little too close?
A little bit like plot convenience, where it's like they're
Yeah.
not all the ship.
But
we have
like,
this
there's explosions on
going
top
off.
of the area that they are literally pulling. Like, the explosions are here, and it's like they're like moving away from like fucking space
It's more
physics.
like, would you explode something while you're in it, or once you've already left? Considering there's one guy left, is it really worth it?
Taserface.
I know. And to his credit, he gets fucking exploded and gets up.
I love
And
that.
he
It's
looks like a burnt marshmallow.
I still love the tell them it was Taserface.
It's like, maybe I'll leave that part out. The guy was like a running joke since he was born.
Oh man. So
and they never give him any credit.
So
Yeah, I loved it.
back on Ego's planet, Peter tries to woo Gamora with his dance moves, but it doesn't quite work as she cannot bring herself to express her own attraction to him. After she leaves, Gamora then sees Nebula coming down on her ship, which that was fucking hilarious, but because you just see like her shooting and yelling from the ship. As Nebula crash lands, she jumps out to start fighting Gamora, but Nebula manages to overpower Gamora, but reveals that she never wanted to prove that she was better than her, just that she wanted to have a real sister. Gamora's success as a warrior led to their father Thanos mutilating Nebula, leading to her resentment of Gamora. The two then form a sort of alliance as they come across a cavern filled with about 100 or so skeletons. When I said at the beginning of the review that I felt like this is more like Peter Quill featuring the Guardians, not entirely, but obviously this scene was 100% Gamora Nebula. And again, just I got the same vibes of this that I did from the opening scene with Yondu at the hotel. Short-ish, sweet, to the point, conveyed everything. You got the message loud and clear.
Yondu one more. This, like, I could see why fucking Nebula lost all the time because she's fucking stupid as shit. She drives her fucking spaceship into a cave. She drives her spaceship into a cave.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
strategy.
What is like? Yeah, though this is gonna end well. She should have exploded immediately. But it does. It's a nice moment for them to kind of like flesh out where they want to go with these two characters. I don't agree with that fact of like the whole fucking spaceship into the cave thing. But it does lead to them getting. So my question is like, is that just like where he puts all his dead fucking kids? Like, why would he have a pile?
Well, he explains later on what exactly happens, which we'll get to in about
And why would the
three
pile
paragraphs.
be there?
Huh?
Considering like what he does with Quinn is like above Earth or above his like planet, and I'm assuming that's when those people couldn't handle it and died.
Basically.
So wouldn't you just like throw them into space? Why are you collecting bones? Is my question. It seems like for plot convenience sake. Is what I'm saying. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Heather, your thoughts on the Gamora Nebula scene?
It's finally something that leads us more into Gamora's thinking and also Nebula's thinking. Gamora was always just, she wanted to be at Thanos' side so that she could learn better what his plans were so that she could eventually get her ultimate revenge on him. But at the same time, you have Nebula, who is essentially a robot at this point.
Yep.
If you go to that other place,
having to constantly go through these procedures and surgeries because she can't match up Thanos's expectations of her to be more like Gamora or to surpass Gamora.
Right. Which is interesting because in the first one, all we knew is that Gamora or Nebula did not like Gamora because, as far as we knew, Thanos favorited her. And now we get a little bit more of like, oh, I didn't care about being better than you. I just wanted you as a sister.
My question to you guys for this whole reveal of like how their childhood kind of went with
Mhm.
Thanos being their like surrogate father. Um, the idea of him like replacing parts on Nebula,
Mhm.
like just mutilating her basically, it doesn't hold for me. It doesn't necessarily. I mean, I maybe I could believe it, but it still doesn't really hold water after like we kind of get introductions to Thanos because his whole ideal isn't necessarily like improving what's lost; it's getting rid of it.
Well, his whole idea was to have his daughters be his bodyguards, essentially.
I just don't see. I don't
Carry
see
out
like
his master
they
plan.
they paint like him being very sadistic. Like that's a very sadistic thing to do. Like she loses, yeah, but I don't feel like he's painted. He's more painted like eventually he's painted like Wonker's version of altruistic.
I mean, he kind of that is an aspect of this that they don't really flush out more. Not here, not in Infinity War or in Endgame, and you know, as great as we're gonna probably praise those movies when we get to them, there are things that we'll get to that I feel like would have been great opportunities to really do some like um answer a couple of small questions. This being one of them is that you
Well,
don't.
you know what? Actually, now that I think about it, I it could actually, it does, it could actually make sense because the proving grounds, like he's live or die type mentality,
Mhm.
and Gamora proves herself to be the better of the two. He doesn't kill Nebula, but he kind of does. He basically turns her into a robot, like you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
right? So she's no longer whatever form of alien humanity she was. And I mean, to Tim's point in the chat, yeah, the character development. They do use it later on, and he does kind of like torture her
Well, no,
with
but we
that.
never. I mean, aside from making Nebula Gamora's equal, there's no other reason why we explore why he kept her around. You know what I mean? Like,
I
you're right.
think he
In
kept
essence,
her
he could have.
around, but he basically killed her, but kept a husk of her around.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
You know what
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, as soon as she lost the first one-on-one, she was done
Yeah.
to him, and that was that. But I guess also there's part of it that doesn't really fit the character. Like they I feel like they're trying to paint a darker picture of Thanos than we get. Even though he's fucked up, don't get me wrong, but like
Yeah.
this is painting like some sort of Silent Hill shit.
I mean,
Like,
you're not wrong. Um, Speaking of crazy shit, uh, Peter and Ego continue to bond on the planet, with Ego telling Peter that as long as there is light on the planet or in the planet, Peter will retain his powers as well as his immortality. Mantis sees that Ego finally has Peter wrapped around his finger now that he knows about his own powers, so she rushes to wake up Drax to warn him that Ego's true intentions are now clear. Meanwhile, Rocket, Groot, Yondu, and Kraglin make it to their destination. Rocket starts to gloat that he wants to save Peter just to prove he's better than him and can hang it over his head, but Yondu shuts Rocket up with this long speech stating how scared Rocket really is and how he puts up the tough guy front as a facade, and then they go and set off to take on Ego. Fuck, another good scene. With
Yondu's the fucking core of this movie. Man. I'm not gonna
God
lie.
damn, it's another one of those.
Michael Rooker, baby.
What?
I just said Michael Rooker, baby.
It's good. It's really, really good to finally, obviously Yondu's talking about it, and he even says, he's like, I know you because you're me, and just damn, it's so
The only
good.
thing I originally thought was, what a character switch. But then I'm thinking, I'm like, he knows where he's going, and he didn't want to go there. He's like, no, don't do it. And I know he said like that's 750 jumps, and we can only really handle 50 and be healthy or whatever. But I think he didn't want to go there because he knows what they're going up against more than the jumps. And, like, he basically resigns himself to death. That's the
By the way, the visuals of them making the jumps,
Fucking fantastic.
hilarious. And yes, we do need to have some edibles and watch that.
But it was a good scene. Well, like the heart of this movie is that one character, Yondu. Without him, the movie wouldn't be what it is. At times, it's a little bit on the nose, yeah, but they don't have 12 episodes to make it not.
Right.
So, yeah, it was a good scene.
Heather, your thoughts?
It's definitely one of the more eye-opening scenes of the movie. Because, it's like, oh shit. We knew he was the planet, but then
Armada.
we knew Ego was the entire planet in and of itself. And we knew that he wasn't necessarily a good guy because, my name is Ego. This is everything about me. And it's always about me because I created everything. So it's like, but you get to this point now and it's just like, oh shit. So he paid Yondu to kidnap him, but yet he never brought Peter to him
Mm-hmm.
because Yondu knew what he was all about and said, no, that's not the life for a kid. And then it's just like, yeah, we need to get the fuck out.
Well, it's also later revealed that Peter wasn't the only kid Yondu picked up.
No, but I feel like he had, I guess, chemistry with the kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Listen to music or whatever, it was
Yep.
like, man, I can't really do this anymore. A couple things. My question with Peter is he getting like somewhat mind controlled? Because it seems like not only like showing him that yes, you are part god or whatever, lesser god, and you have power and this and this. It seemed like there was more than that influencing him.
The way I interpreted it was
Some
that
fucking weird shit where he's like, I'm going to take over these planets. And I'm basically a virus taking over planets, and he's like, it's beautiful.
yeah, basically he was going to shed his humanity and become like an energy being. Is basically the con. So here's the fun part. Here's the kicker. We're introduced to Ego as we're introduced to him as technically the first Celestial that we know about. We've seen hints about the Celestials in the first Guardians movie because Nowhere is the head of a dead Celestial, which is where the Collector resides, and that's where they go to sell the Infinity Stone. And on top of that, the scene where we actually see the Power Stone in use with the flashbacks as the Collector's talking about the Infinity Stones, that being that puts down the giant like staff that is also considered a Celestial. At this point, the MCU didn't really establish much else about what a Celestial is, but from the general idea that I got from just Ego in this movie, that he is more of an energy being than anything else because he doesn't really have a quote-unquote physical form, that he formed the planet basically from like his remnants or his brain. That was all that was left over.
He's a brain, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
So my thought process was that if Peter Quill was to join Ego, he would shed his humanity and basically become a part of this energy collective, basically. That's the way I interpreted it.
So, like, because we already know about his character, and once, like, Kurt Russell starts to go in his diatribe about, like, what he's going to do, it starts off, like, okay, then it becomes less innocent, and then it becomes downright evil, and the whole time he's like, yeah, it's beautiful, yeah. And he gets to a point where that breaks.
Until one line.
Yeah, but I feel like there's got to be some sort of influence that he has on him, because it doesn't really hold true to his character.
Don't think so, because Peter's able to break pretty free. He's actually able to break free pretty easy. Or as what's his name?
Yeah, but like, why would he think of a bunch of planets being taken over, and like he goes into being like, I want everything to be me, and he's like, I get it. Really?
I was gonna. It's what's the line from
Martha.
pitch meeting? No. Well, he must be have trouble breaking free from his grip. Absolutely no trouble whatsoever. Barely an inconvenience.
Yeah, that's I get that vibe from this a little bit, but
Shout out to Pitch Meeting, one of my favorite YouTube movie channels of all time.
It's so fucking hilarious.
But that's the way I got it. I mean, again, plot convenience, yada yada yada. But that's the way I interpret it. I'm not saying it's the correct answer, and I'm sure Marvel fans out there might correct me, but that's what I got from this. Because again,
let me ask you this to this point.
Yes.
Were you having more fun watching the Peter Quill part, or more fun watching the Yondu Rocket Raccoon part?
I'll let Heather answer first.
Yondu Rocket Raccoon.
I
enjoyed that part more, just because of the fact of the fucking arrow shooting everywhere and people. The one guy that they wanted to spare just sitting there just watching the arrow go all over the place.
There was more to enjoy from the Yondu Raccoon side of things because you had the comedic, plus you had the heavy moments. The Peter stuff
more
with
character development.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's not that I didn't enjoy.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. They're both very enjoyable.
There were things about like the stuff that was happening on the Ego planet that I did enjoy, but in terms of weight, I definitely enjoy the Rocket Yondu stuff at this point more, because even though Ego and Peter had the majority of the focus on the other side of that pendulum, or the other side of that scale, I felt like there was more weight on the other side.
This is kind of why I brought up like his influence, because to this point, half of this movie has done really good to explain the actions of people.
Yep.
And this is the one thing that I'm going to say a nitpick, but it might be a bit bigger than a nitpick, that I didn't really get, because though Quill is like egotistical, he's not to the point of kill humanity egotistical, and that's the one part where I was like, he's got to have some more, like he basically infects him, so I'm assuming he had some sort of influence on him, because it doesn't really hold true to his character, where everything else in this movie has kind of been about character building in a sensical way.
You're talking about Ego's influence on Peter?
Well, when he tells him what his purpose is, like why he is going with the sea instead of his wife or whatever.
I think that what happened was he originally was like, "Hey, Peter, you're not alone. I'm with you. You know, we are one and the same," and looking to expand more of who we are and family. What he's been looking for since he got kidnapped by Yondu, ironically. And then once things came to pass and things came to light, then I think that the second time around he was under control. You know what I mean?
Maybe it was just like if there's not a higher influence on him, then it would be like his change would be too dramatic. Like it would happen too soon. But like he was trepidatious at the beginning and be like, I don't believe this guy. I don't believe this guy. And then they played catch, and all of a sudden he's like, I believe everything he says. So I don't know. Like that's a gripe, but I'm inclined to believe that because they're linked, and because he's a celestial, and because he doesn't really understand his power to an extent, he's part celestial, that he would be able to, like, he can influence an entire planet to grow. How could he not influence?
Right. No, yeah, I get your point there.
You know what I mean? Like,
you're not wrong.
I think I think that's why his charm is so affluent. I think that's part of his control powers. It's like he charms you in, and you don't. He charms you in so that you don't see anything on the peripheral going on.
That I felt. They didn't explain it, but I felt like, especially like the key for me was like they basically put blinders on his eyes, which to me means he's no longer seeing for himself anymore. At least at like a thematic level. But what a good casting choice for Kurt Russell because fucking The Thing and everything he's ever been in, the Charm Master,
Yeah.
man with fucking beastly beard.
Yep.
Fucking so many people hate him, but you know what? I love the
Why?
guy.
Who
I
hates
love
him?
the movies he's been in.
Nobody should hate him. He's great.
So here comes the big reveal that we already spoiled at least 3 sentences ago. Ego explains to Peter that he wants to make what he calls the expansion. He went around the galaxy to thousands of other worlds to plant the seedlings to grow his power over the galaxy and cover the planets in an extension of himself. He impregnated women from those worlds and produced many children that Yondu delivered to him, but when they did not possess the same power of a celestial, Ego had them killed, and now their bones are what Gamora and Nebula found for, fertilizer.
In the bone pile.
The bone pile. The bone room. Got to make sure you fill up the bone room. Peter just so happens to hold the power that Ego was looking for. Ego also reveals that he put the tumor that killed Meredith in her head so that he would not feel the pain of being apart from her. Peter, of course, snaps out of it and begins to unload his guns on Ego in fury. And in response, Ego takes Peter and controls him to start spreading the seedlings across the planet, causing mass destruction. To top it all off, Ego crushes Peter's Walkman and Awesome Mix Volume 2 that, of course, his mother left him. No! Meanwhile, Rocket, Groot, and Yondu meet up with Gamora, Drax, Nebula, and Mantis as they gear up to stop Ego. Unfortunately, they're also met by a fleet of the Sovereigns out to kill them as well. Peter fights Ego's human form, but his entire planet's self fights back. Mantis is able to put Ego to sleep while the Guardians take care of the others. They fight back against the Sovereigns and eventually destroy their whole fleet with a bunch of lasers. Meanwhile, Rocket builds a bomb using the batteries he stole, which Groot takes and runs off with, despite Rocket warning him not to push the wrong button else they'll all die. Mantis gets knocked out by a fireball. Mantis, look out. Breaking her hold on Ego and reawakening him. As the others try to get safe, Ego begins to consume them all. Peter then continues fighting his father using his celestial powers. Now freed, Groot then finds Ego's brain in the planet's core and sets the bomb to go off in 5 minutes. So,
that's a lot.
Ego's a dick.
Yes.
He's also one of my favorite antagonists, actually, because, and I know you were just talking about this earlier, basically about like, oh, like, you sort of understand his process. I mean, obviously, with the exception of putting the tumor in his mom's head, you take that part out. He's just trying to like reproduce.
Well, I mean, he just holds true to his name.
Right.
It's all about me. Everything's gonna become me. I'll only feel happy in a universe when I'm the only one there.
Sounds like people I know.
Yeah. Ego's a killer, but there's a lot going over. Holy shit.
Yep.
I mean, I will say that Mantis Look Out was that moment where I did laugh out loud. that was the best.
The slow-mo. Mantis Look Out.
That was great. One thing I did have a problem with. Okay, so like he is the planet.
Yes.
Why was he so fucking slow?
He has many layers, like onions.
I know, but I hate you. He can move. He was basically like energy, so he should be able to move real
yeah, but
fast.
the energy's from the center of the Earth, or center of the planet.
It's like, he's coming. He'll be here soon.
Yeah.
Was he taking an Uber to get here?
Yeah.
He fucking is that brain. How can he not just create something right next to us?
Of course I got issues.
Yeah.
That's my freaking father.
You killed my physical form, which really should be the easiest thing for him to upkeep instead of a fucking planet.
I mean, it has a penis.
I did love the fact that like there was no hesitation in Peter Quill as soon as he's like, that's why they put the tumor in her. He just fucking shot. He lit him up like the 4th
And
of
like
July.
he knew he didn't give a shit. Like, yeah, I did appreciate that. Like, oh yeah, fuck you, and like that's actually, I think that's up there as far as like fans, like one of the biggest, like, before we get to the Avengers Infinity War, obviously, like emotional moments in the MCU of like when Peter finds us out, he's like, what? And I know that sounds bad, and just fucking blasts him.
I love the fact that he doesn't even hesitate, because at this point in
No,
time,
he doesn't.
He doesn't really know that doing what he did would have not
Do
killed
anything?
him.
Yeah, he didn't care.
Yeah, and he just fucking lights him up, man.
It's just pure rage in that moment, and that's been rage he held on to since he was fucking 8 years old and watched his
Yep.
mom die and did not take her hand.
I mean, though it's, I think, if I recall correctly, it's kind of chopped up this scene because there is a moment in time where he does say like, I couldn't go back. It's like he's talking about not being able to go back to her, didn't go back to her. He's like, well, I do understand. I was there. I watched her fucking die, and like that's where they never really reconcile that. And
The way that he reveals it too is
So
it's so
callous.
So good.
nonchalant. He's basically like, yeah, I stepped on her like an ant.
He's like, my
That
river
was
lily. He
that.
goes, I knew if I visited her a third time, I knew if I go a fourth time, I wouldn't go back. And it really pained me to put that tumor in her head. And it's like,
He's obviously
oh,
terrible and super like emotionally manipulative.
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, like he's like
that.
technically like at a core he's a really good villain. I just kind of hate the fact that he becomes a rock monster.
Fighting Pac-Man.
Yeah, I didn't really care a lot for the end fight. Like what? Okay, so like when Rocket Raccoon shows up and he's like, "Yeah, we're in like a work vehicle or something like that, right? I
Mhm.
guess it's like a mining vehicle, but also one of the strongest fucking ships in the world. It becomes a death laser show at some point. I'm like, is it really a mining vehicle or whatever you said it was? Because it seems to be murder fest.
Well, you gotta think also of who they stole it from. I mean, they stole it from the Ravagers, so of course
Yeah,
it is
they're
a mining
definitely not.
ship.
Good
They
point.
had
They're,
to do it. They had to fix it up and make it so that it could protect itself.
Right.
it was kind of cool design though, with the little balls. No, it was a cool design. Little balls that flew all over it and shot out. Um, there was. I'm actually saying it was a cool design. I hate you. Okay, there was a moment in time where like the ship gets destroyed or whatever, or part of it does, and they fall out, and they're like, ah! They fall for like fucking 200, 300 feet, and they just land in superhero pose. I'm like,
Cue the JP. They should be
uh,
dead.
that moment was like, no. You, they all land on their knees. I'm like, you
And then
ain't
the
walking ever
Mantis lookout
again.
scene, which
Yeah. Yeah, the reason I loved it so much, I'm like, oh, they're doing this is why I would okay, the beginning scene where they kind of like subvert expectations for Marvel movies. This is another scene where they spend like an egregious amount of time fucking showing them all stand up together in the pose and circling around.
I actually just pulled it up. It's like 20 seconds.
Yeah, it's long as fuck. I'm like,
Actually,
okay, this is like
21,
fan service.
22, and then
she,
3. Boom.
she just gets TKO'd. Mantis, look out! It was
Let me see if I can
it
play the
was
little clip. Hold on.
It was so much like fucking Family Guy, Peter Griffin and Meg.
Mantis, look out!
Yes.
When he hits her with the bat. I didn't see you there, whatever the fuck it was.
Oh God, so good.
There is another line coming up with that. It's, ow, my nipples. That's the line I really
So
love.
I have sensitive nipples.
I have sensitive nipples.
That's why he doesn't wear a shirt. It all makes sense.
Yeah, right. I mean, Heather, what do you think about the reveal, Ego's motivation, the fight, all this crazy shit that just goes down?
As soon as this scene started and he started talking, and Peter was just like, "Well, why didn't you ever do this? Why didn't you ever do that?" And it's just like, "Oh shit, he's gonna drop the bomb, isn't he?" And there it was, and that's why I had to put the tumor in her head. Right
Really?
to
What?
childhood. It's just that whole thing, just like, what the fuck, man? It's like you wanted to like him, despite the fact that you knew he was egotistical douchebag, but you still wanted to like him. And then he does that, and it's just like, well, no. And Peter letting go of his rage right after that, fucking perfect. And the fight scene, and I'm gonna tell you right now, he is all energy basement, but he's using that energy to move rock and stone. He's not using the energy itself to attack them.
When he becomes that like face and shoots out like an energy wave that they stop because she puts him to sleep. But also, like, did you like notice too, like, when he does create his like physical form, he looks fucking like a corpse.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
we didn't talk about it at all, but like, so am I assuming like he planted all these things in a bunch of planets, and that was like the extent of what his power could do? But he needed additional power to make them like blossom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
That's why he
because
said
like
he couldn't
the
stay on
blob
Earth,
comes
was
for
because
everybody at some point.
if he stayed on Earth, he'd be away from his home source, and then he wouldn't be able to do what he was looking to do. Right.
I can tell you if that fucking thing exploded and I ran and then it just stopped randomly, I wouldn't stick around and take pictures. I'd be fucking jumping in a car and driving
Yep.
as far away from it as possible.
Right there with you. So I guess I'll barrel through just the last part of this because there's a good chunk left. But so Drax carries
Leave the
Mantis.
after credits for after.
Oh yeah, I'll save those for a separate part. But anyway, Drax carries Mantis to the ship while Gamora and Nebula make it back. Rocket gives his last space suit to Yondu, knowing he cannot save both him and Peter. Gamora tries to go back, but Rocket stops her so he doesn't lose another friend. Ego pleads with Peter to stop the bomb, or else Peter will just be another normal human. Peter says that he sees nothing wrong with that and lets the bomb go off. Ego's human form disintegrates as the rest of the planet starts to explode, while Yondu flies by and grabs Peter, but as they leave the planet's atmosphere, Yondu puts the suit on Peter to save him. He tells Peter that while Ego was his father, he was never his daddy. Yondu then starts to freeze up in space, and Peter sadly watches him die. The Guardians prepare to give Yondu a proper Ravager funeral. Kraglin gives Peter a Zune to make up for his lost Walkman. Jesus Christ, that's a fucking flashback. While Yondu had been meaning to give, which Yondu had been meaning to give him for a while. In return, Peter gives Kraglin Yondu's arrow, feeling that Yondu would have wanted him to take it. Nebula sets off to hunt down Thanos herself, but not before reconciling with Gamora one final time. Mantis decides to stay with the Guardians, and as Yondu's body goes out into space, the Guardians see dozens of other Ravager ships arriving to pay their final respects to Yondu. I got a big, what the fuck was it? Death of Spock vibe.
Yeah.
From that end part of Guardians. I mean that in all the great ways. Man, you knew the Yondu scene was coming, but it doesn't take away from the emotional sting.
No, it doesn't. It really, really doesn't. I mean, Yondu was such a staple for this movie, and to see him make that arc from villain to hero in this movie throughout the course of the whole movie, it's just it was well deserved, and just actually seeing him being returned to the Ravager fleet and having that Ravager funeral.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like full circle for Yondu, and
Yep.
he deserved it.
The funny thing was, though, at the very first, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Peter survived being in space in the first one. Why wouldn't he survive it in this one? Like when he
for
like
a
say
little bit.
What?
For a little bit.
Well, I remember now because and they actually covered their asses with this one. They said that if the planet goes and the light source goes, which essentially is Ego, then Peter would lose his half celestial side's power. So he'd basically be all human, in which case he wouldn't be able to survive. So I was like, right. You say, clever girl.
Finally, we get some clever writing.
Again, just like they did at the end of the first one. Yep.
You know what? The guy he fucked up, man. He was a brain. Why didn't he like create? If only he had little hands around his fucking brain, he could have like stopped a lot of the shit from happening.
I am so smart. SMRT. I mean SMART.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they did the whole thing with like. I'm kind of confused. Like, is Groot like mentally challenged?
He's a baby.
No, like in general.
No. Actually, they do imply he's not the brightest in the first movie. So I mean, possibly.
I mean, a tree first and foremost.
Yeah, I was about to say he's basically a fucking tree. So I mean,
and for the longest time, I thought like he was saying "I am Groot," and even though characters react to him like he's speaking, I almost felt like nobody actually understands what he's saying, and they're just like thinking.
Wild guess.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. But then they get to a point where Thor's like, "I studied it on Oscald."
Yeah.
So maybe not. The scene with well, I mean, you knew it was coming anyway.
Right.
Like they was heavily foreshadowed. I'm gonna give you one of these and one of these, and we're gonna leave without you. Okay. Well, then there's only one thing that's gonna happen, but doesn't mean that it wasn't good. It was a good scene. Um, every time I saw Yondu, I was kind of like, I couldn't stop looking at his teeth. But aside from his teeth, like they didn't even make any sense. What, like one pointy end on all of them? Like, what is he eating?
Not the fact that he's fucking blue. That fine.
That I can
Right.
get by. Or he's got a
What's
fin.
the Ravenger dental plan like? Can you go over more detail about that? Because
Can you
I have
gonna
some
even
concern.
these bad boys out? I don't know, but yeah, it was a good scene, and it did like this is the thing. This with this movie, it like balances a lot of what it's putting forward pretty good. I never got too much into any exact emotion. Like I got partial because it balances it well. It never like leans one too heavily. I mean, though it was an emotional scene, it wasn't like breaking down or anything like that, you know.
Break it down.
It was a good scene, and it was a good payoff for his character and everything that they did with his character. And I'm glad like a fucking Marvel movie kills somebody and they don't come back.
Well, multiverse. What do you think of the Yondu, like the funeral scene or the funeral?
That was actually like visually, it was stunning. I the thing I like that they, because it's like in space, that they can create whatever they really want, but it feels like care went into this one, where it's like we're gonna like the setup that they did for him. There had to be somebody that wrote lore about like outside of the comic books and everything. Like there had to be somebody that like transcribed that or put their own flavor on that to be like, we're gonna put this strip and this pin and this strip and this pin, and like it just made it feel a lot more real than if they were just gonna put his body out there.
right.
And they had like an incinerator that kind of like just turns you to particles.
Basically.
But it was neat because it like, you know, then he flows out through space as like space dust. But also everybody else showing up was the cherry on the top.
Yeah, it gave it back to the full circle of the idea that he was kicked out by the Ravagers, and then they're coming back to honor him.
Do we
so.
know why they showed up? Was
They-
there like a point in time where they conveyed something? I can't remember.
They just said that the word got out that he had died, or how he they didn't say how they found out.
Because I mean, the last conversation with Stallone was like, "Yeah, it's never gonna happen." And it's like, he's dead. It's gonna happen.
Well, because Sylvester Stallone's like, he did honor us. So
I don't know what he's saying. Let's send the fleet.
so I mean that's the implication. So a bunch of end credit scenes in this one, depending on which version you watch. So, but the big ones
There's
are
like 4 or 5 of them. Or something.
I was about to say there's technically 4, but really the big ones to note are, well, there's obviously only really one heavy one. The rest are kind of more just like cute or like, you know, little chuckle ones. The first one being that Kraglin tries to practice using the arrow. He doesn't get quite the hang of it, and he ends up sticking Drax with it. Fucking died. He just screams, and that's the fucking end of it. It's like there's no. That's just fucking. Stakar honors Yondu's sacrifice by forming his own team of Ravengers with Martinex Dignaga, Charlie 27, Starhawk, and Mainframe. The only reason I bring this up is because I actually did some research, and you're gonna kind of laugh at who the voices for some of these characters were. So, Martinex Tanaga was the crystal-looking one, the ice-looking one. That was voiced by Michael Rosenbaum, who a lot of you and Trek would certainly know is the actor who played Lex
Luthor
in Smallville.
Shit. Baldy McGee.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mainframe, which was the robotic head, was voiced by Miley Cyrus.
That one I knew.
Basement, you gonna breathe? You overstimulated over there by that piece of information?
I said perfect.
Okay. Groot is then shown as a teenager with Peter scolding him for leaving his roots lying around, but Groot just mocks him and plays video games. Teen angst as always. We do see, of course, our Stan Lee cameo that we see a little bit of earlier in the movie, where he, of course, is sitting with the Watchers discussing previous adventures, but they get bored and they just end up leaving him alone, which I thought was fucking hilarious. However, the big heavy one refers to Aisha from the Sovereign, discussing with another Sovereign their new plan to take down the Guardians of the Galaxy. We see Aisha sitting by a birthing pod, waiting to break out whatever is inside to use it against the Guardians, and she decides to call it Adam, referring to Adam Warlock. So it looks like we have our enemy set up for the titular third Guardians of the Galaxy movie coming out in about a year from now. So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Heather, I will let you ladies first with your overall thoughts, rating, and anything else you want to say about the movie.
Again, after this string of bad movies we just had to sit through, this was a breath of fresh air. Yes, it's a sequel, but it's a good sequel. It brings back the comedy that was perfectly fit into the Marvel universe, but it also gave you the backstory for Peter Quill. It gave you the character development for all of them, and it's set up for the future.
Yep.
So this is what Marvel should have done with Doctor Strange.
And others. Would you say
The
this
new Doctor
was
Strange.
as good, better, or worse than the first?
I would say it was as good.
All right. And if you had to rate this out of 10,
I'd stick with the 7.5, 8.
damn.
For this.
All right, on the high side. I mean, hey, not unwarranted. Basement.
Okay, so this movie does everything it should do and everything it should do good. It's not an exceptional movie by any means, but everything it does well. And that includes setting up future endeavors. That includes having a storyline. That includes character growth. It's the most well-balanced Marvel movie I've seen in a long time. That handles all of what Disney asks of Marvel, all of what's asked of the MCU, but also actually makes an interesting movie. There's things I didn't like in it, and one of them is I didn't like the whole rock thing, but how else are you gonna fight a person that's a planet? Like the whole end fight where they become like kaiju rock men and punch each other. It was like, yeah. But I mean I think I said 7 out of 10 when we started for the original one. I might end up I probably end up 7.5 on this, and I might even end up 7.5 on the first one. I think it is in the same realm as the first one. Like they're very similar rated, which is a good thing because it didn't fall off. And I mean, the last one was Doctor Strange, and don't get me wrong, Doctor Strange could have been a decent movie if they at least explained the principles of it.
It was hollow. We yeah.
I hate it.
I'm kind of in the same boat with you guys. I mean, I'm not trying to like obviously make this a love fest and be like we're all on the same page. It's hard to top your first movie no matter what you're doing as far as a sequel. Very rarely does a sequel do as good a job or better than the first. I definitely agree with you both that it's definitely as good as the first. My fear going into this, having not seen this movie in a long time, was that it's not going to have the same it's not going to have the same unpredictability as the first one, which it sort of doesn't, because the first one we went into with no expectations and no nothing to base it off of. Breath of fresh air was brand spanking new in this in terms of being extremely different. But what I appreciated about this movie was the fact that there were enough elements from the first one that carried over very well into the second one, but had enough differences to make it its own thing. And so it's not like you were retreading water or you were recycling the same jokes, which, if you notice, Marvel movies sometimes do that, where they'll reference things that were funny in previous movies or previous team-ups.
At
And
that point, Connor, like this movie is a comedy movie, but it's a very different comedy movie.
oh yeah,
Like it doesn't have the same Marvel comedy that has been
no, it's a James Gunn
basically
movie.
destroyed. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on the 7.5 out of 10. I think that it is probably how do I say this? For me, and this is just me being my own personal bias, the Captain America movies are some of my favorite standalone movies in the MCU, but Guardians is a very close second. And I only say that not to smite Iron Man, but we all saw Iron Man 3. Even the Thor movies were up there too. So but like Guardians is like, so far, haven't seen a bad Guardians movie. You know what I mean? Third one's going to come out in a year from now. I can't say it's going to be a bad one. I think it's going to on the track record to be another huge success. Just based off of not only James Gunn's work, but what he's able to pull off in these first two. And again, you know, talk about what we talked about earlier. Great character development. Pacing was very well done. They gave enough to each character. Even though I said like, oh, it's mostly Peter Quill. It was, but there was enough going on with the other characters that you got at least something from pretty much, except for Groot, everybody. And
here's my question for moving forward.
Okay.
I would rather see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and then see Thor.
Unless something happens with Thor.
I just feel like, or just like, I mean, my what I'm thinking is Thor is going to be, I'm not Thor anymore. I'm now one of the Guardians after basically Thor Love and Thunder.
For those of you who don't know, at this point in time, as of the recording of this episode, we've only seen a teaser for Thor Love and Thunder. It has not come out yet. It comes out about 2 months from now, and we've seen the teaser that the Guardians of the Galaxy, or at least most of them, will be in Thor Love and Thunder, or at least the beginning of Thor.
I almost wanted them to like just do a team up movie of Thor and Guardians and not individual movies.
The as Guardians of the Galaxy.
That would work, but like it's just I don't know, man. Thor Love and Thunder is.
You're not loving it?
I got bad feelings about Phase 4 in general.
Can't say I blame you for the most part. But any case, I think it's going to wrap up here for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Any last minute thoughts, Heather and Basement, before we wrap up this episode?
Good movie. It's a lot of fun.
Spider-Man.
What's that?
That's next, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm so done with Spider-Man, considering this is now our 4th Spider-Man.
Yeah, there's a thing called killing a character.
Wait, 4th in terms of movies, or?
No, in terms of Spider-Man.
I know we had Toby, we had Andrew. Who was the other one?
Miles Morales. But it was a movie.
But it was after this, I think.
Oh yeah. Well.
But anyway.
Fuck it.
But thank you everybody for tuning in for another episode of the Marvel Roundtable right here on the Horny Goat YouTube channel and the Horny Goat Podcasting Network. Make sure you follow us on your favorite podcasting platforms. If you're listening to us on Apple, make sure you guys give us an awesome 5-star rating and review. It would greatly appreciate it, and also would help spread us to the masses as far as getting us more noticed on that platform. So if you're listening to us on Apple, hit us up with a review as well. And of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/hornygoat, for some great, awesome, and crazy content. Next time, when we come back to the Marvel Roundtable, we are back down to earth, and we are back to a very somewhat familiar face. As for the first time in the MCU, Tom Holland takes center stage as everyone's favorite web-swinging, right? Yeah, web-swinging and web-slinging, goddamn, web-swinging superhero, as we take a look at Marvel Studios presenting Spider-Man: Homecoming.